So it's really good to be here today to talk to you about intelligent assistants and also authentication and identity. And I'm putting this in the context of what the World Economic Forum has been recently published. In fact, Professor Klaus Schwab wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And what I'm going to be doing today is talking about this from the point of view of not just the technology, but the implications to business, the implications to society, to personal data, identity, and the role that we all play in this industry, because we are actually at a crossroads internationally. And just as a bit of background, you might notice from my accent, I have a rather strange accent. So I'm a British citizen. I live part of the year in the UK. We have offices in the UK. But I also live in Australia and New Zealand. I sit on the board of some of the largest brands in the world, like Sky Television. I sit on the boards of a major bank, as well as a healthcare company. And I see this from both sides. I see it both from the branding perspective of how companies are trying to leap the chasm to be relevant in the new fourth industrial revolution. But I also run my own company where we are at the forefront of making that real. And so what I will be doing today will be giving you this from a couple of perspectives. What it's like in the boardroom, what it might be like in your day-to-day jobs, and we'll talk a little bit about that from a branding perspective, and also real-life examples of where we've gone live in the world, and you can start to see how this all becomes real. But let's define what fourth industrial revolution is. It is effectively a convergence, and you can almost call it a perfect storm. And there is not one industry that is immune from this. So whether you are sitting in as an electricity utility, whether you're sitting here as a bank, whether you're even sitting here as representing government and citizens, or whether you're in any industry, retail, I could rattle off 27 different industries around the world, everyone is being affected by the fourth industrial revolution. And that perfect storm are things like artificial intelligence. A lot is being written about what is the future of work? What will the future of roles be? When we have algorithms, who are those algorithms working for? And we'll talk a bit about this in today's discussion. Intelligent assistants are the flip side of artificial intelligence, because all an intelligent assistant does is bring that artificial intelligence to the human to be able to get an outcome. Hope the sound doesn't do that too often. Clearly within all of that is Internet of Things. You then also have identity. Many of you are involved in identity and authentication. And in fact, the magic passwords that we have today, which are really tiresome when we try and remember too many of them, we will automatically be identified and authenticated in the fourth industrial revolution. And I'll show some examples of that. And then, of course, there are other more esoteric things like quantum computing, nanotechnology. All of these are coming together to bring the physical world and the digital world together. Augmented reality is part of that. Sensors are part of that. So if you start to think about the human body, how we have sensors in our hands that give input to our brain, intelligent agents are actually the brains of the planet. And the question is going to be, are these brains working for you, or are these brains working for someone else? And you better find out, because if they're working for someone who perhaps is working for a Russian oligarch out there trying to find out what you really are doing in terms of all of your banking data, you could be unwittingly talking to a chatbot that might in fact be working for the bad guys, not the good guys. And this is where authentication and identity of knowing who you're talking to both ways becomes very, very important. So this is what the fourth industrial revolution, and it's operating at an unprecedented velocity. So you thought that things were really, really busy in the last 27 years, and I thought life was pretty busy because I've been in the tech industry for 27 years and I've seen it all. Working for IBM and Dell and SAP, automating all these value chains. It is happening at an unprecedented velocity. Nobody will be exempt from what is happening now. And in fact, I was just saying to the Opus guys, even when we did this event in New York about 7 months ago, just look at how fast the world has changed and the dialogues we're having around intelligent agents and chatbots, how quickly that is surfacing. So I've talked about the disruption, but equally with disruption there comes opportunity. And in that opportunity, it means that if you can master this, if you actually understand what it is and you can figure out how to position yourselves well, you in fact can become one of the masters of the new universe that's emerging. And I'll talk to you a bit about some of the research that's being done by MIT that actually starts to put that into context for brands And we personally do a lot of work with brands, helping them figure out where do they fit in this fourth industrial revolution. So the net of all of this, think about the world as a new global neural network, a new ambient intelligent layer where there will be no more logging into websites because they're just boring. Who wants to be in a static website? That's not personalized. Where you will not be downloading an app so much anymore. It's been proven scientifically that the average human being can cope with 9 apps on average. What you need intelligent ambience that actually does stuff for you. And I don't think there's going to be, one intelligent agent that will rule them all. I think there's going to be many of these intelligent agents out there. And these intelligent agents are all going to be talking to each other. You're going to have sensors, so you're going to have smart bottles. The tables are going to be smart. You'll be recognized when you walk through airports. This is what you call the end-to-end neural networks. So the sensors are almost like the sensors of your skin. The intelligent agents are like the brain. The authentication is going to be like the antibodies of what gets in, what gets to survive, and what doesn't get to survive. And so this is a reality that we're moving toward. So before I get into this talk a little bit more, though, I'd like you to kind of give yourself a little mental test. And this is called an agility test. Can I just ask for a show of hands? How many of you are not from the intelligent agent and industry, but you actually are working for brands? Can I just see a show of hands around the room to see how many real brand people we have? Okay, so we've got quite a few people that are brands. So obviously you're thinking about these things. So it's good that you're at a convention like this. So I'm going to ask you to pass 4 critical questions. These are almost like canaries in your coal mine. Are any of these canaries singing at the moment? And the first canary in your coal mine is, are you experiencing low single-digit growth? And I don't expect you to put your hands up to answer that question, because you might not want to answer that question, but just think about this quietly to yourself. If your business model is experiencing low single-digit growth and you're not growing the way you used to, that would be an indicator that you're probably not quite match fit enough in this fourth industrial revolution. You're kind of losing some relevancy for some reason out there in the market. The second one is, are your margins under pressure? So are you making the profits that you used to be able to make? Are your yield curves as good as they were? And sitting on the board of a bank, I can tell you the yield curves are nothing like what they used to be. It's tough being in the banking industry today, but just about every industry is tough. Whether you're a television company, whether you are an energy retailer, everyone is doing it tough. Margins are under pressure. Because there's a third question you have to ask yourself. Is your product or your service now becoming a commodity? And a lot of people are writing about the outcome economy. What's the outcome that the person wants? What are their jobs to be done? Because your product or your service on its own is a commodity. The outcome is, I don't want a mortgage, I want a home, and I want the things in my home. So think about the hole that you want to drill, it's not the drill bit. So it's never become more true than it is now, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So if you feel like your products and services are commoditized, you are definitely not match fit, and you haven't started to think about what is your new value proposition in the fourth industrial revolution. The next one is low net promoter scores and customer sat. It's amazing to me how many of our of the brands that we work with really are trying to drive up NPS. But it's amazing also that how many of them are in negative NPS. And just a few percentage points, to nudge it north, it's like, yay, we've won. But then they compare themselves to the next 4 in their industry, and they're all in negative NPS. So kind of something's missing there. So it's almost like, you've really got to figure out, again, the outcome. So what is it that creates value? So you can either be positioning yourselves today as winners or losers in this fourth industrial revolution. And so we call this the sort of like, the diamond is a little bit like a black hole. You can disappear into the black hole, or you can actually start to seize some of the opportunities that I'll talk to you about today. So it's not all darkness and doom and gloom, but if you've said yes to any one of those 4, or if you've said yes to all 4, the chances are you're not that match fit right now in the fourth industrial revolution, and you need to start to think about where you're positioned, what your economic models are, what ecosystems could you do, and how would you use this technology to positively position yourselves in the world that is rapidly emergent. And as I said, this is exponential. This is not linear growth. This is happening exponentially. Further proof points, if you hadn't already believed me, Deloitte's shift report, the average lifespan of a company is down to 15 years and shrinking. We know that. It's been proven. Deloitte report on it every single year. Another one, the downgrade in return on assets. But it's not just return on assets being downgraded, it's even in banking, return on equity. So all of the returns, it's getting harder and harder to get the returns that we used to. It shows that the current model is under stress and pressure. McKinsey's, they're doing a lot of really good research here as well. And they are also talking about the fact that without any change, like if we didn't have the fourth industrial revolution, the world would be running out of growth. And part of the reason why that the world is under stress and pressure right now is because the third industrial revolution, which I'll talk to in a moment, actually has run out of steam. And I'll tell you why in a moment, but I'll give you a little hint. Because it was really mostly supply chain driven. It was actually producing as much as we could at the least possible cost with an adequate customer experience. And it was very much based around products and services. The world has shifted. It doesn't cut the mustard anymore. These next generations of millennials and kids that you're trying to interact with just are not interested in the cheesy old stuff that we throw out there anymore. So you have to rethink how we're going to go and actually drive the new growth in the market. McKinsey's another one here, that digital flows. What's interesting is that digital flows are having a larger impact now on GDP growth across borders than any other flow right now. So you start to see some of the early indications that data and data flows happening internationally, happening in a seamless way, but with security and authentication and all of the things that we talk about, because there's a lot of bad guys out there that want to do bad things with people's data. This is actually the source of where the growth and the opportunities come from. And you cannot do it at scale relying on big data. And I'll talk to you about that. You have to have intelligent agents out there on your behalf actually giving you the scale and the velocity that you need to stitch together these new end-to-end outcomes that people want. So here's the world that we've actually come from. Now you might think that, oh well, that looks like a really, really old world. But I would say that a lot of our mindset of companies is still very much rooted in that world, where we actually, the first industrial revolution was very much around, great, we have machines, and initially they were steam driven. Then what we did is we brought out production lines, and America was amazing at production lines. Is that me or is that you? All right. So production lines came out there. Electricity came within that. So think about the impact that electricity had on the world. It was like magic. Lights came on, we didn't have gas anymore, and we got into a completely new era. But a lot of our mindset is still very much driven by this. Where was the empowered consumer in this production line? I'm going to say Ford was great. You could have any model as long as it was black. And then, of course, consumers got choice, and we can have any car almost that we want. So we still very much think about things in a mechanistic, little boxes, little rows, silos, data silos. We make the customers jump through how many hoops to come through all our multiple doors, because we still think in this mode. And the fourth industrial revolution actually changes that. And all we really did in the last 17 years was we automated that. So a lot of the ERP supplies, and I was the president and CEO for SAP for North America, what did we do? Is we took all of those really, really smart processes that we had and we put them on digital steroids. And what we did is we had websites, we did supply chain, we did MRP. So if we start to look at this, we automated it. So think about supply chain planning, MRP. We brought out CRM. 13 years ago was the last time we did that. But CRM was not about the customer. This was about putting people into pipelines, putting them into funnels. And then what we did is that these devices came out, we gave people apps, but we're still very much thinking in silos. Because even my world, my personal world, is siloed across how many apps? My fitness app, my energy app, my this app. And the world is actually getting very tired of apps. There's too many apps out there. And that's why intelligent agents are rising up, because intelligent agents are replacing the apps. Because what they're doing is they're able to create these seamless end-to-end outcomes for people. So here's what the fourth industrial revolution looks like. And I've talked a little bit about the neural network. So think about the companies out there that are putting sensors on everything. Beacons going everywhere. These sensors will be in airports. You'll be walking through an airport and your biometric identity, this is not future. This is not 10 years away. This is like less than 5 years away. People will know who you are. They'll know where you've been. They'll know where you are on the street. and then they'll be knowing what you're doing in your home. And the sensors, the mobile devices, you've got lots of good examples like the Alexas of this world and a lot of the other little devices that are coming into your home, the Samsung TVs, all of these things. The question is, though, where is all that data going? The Samsung TV is always on. And in fact, if you read the fine print, that data is going somewhere. When you have an argument with your wife, in front of your wife in the kitchen with the Alexa device, it's listening. Where is that data going? The biggest worry that I have with brands around the fourth industrial revolution is, are we going to get disintermediated? So if we actually start to let Facebook's or we let Google's Now and Microsoft's Cortana or Alexa's Echo start to build the relationship with the customer and they become the neural network, they become the masters, and guess what? The airline gets disintermediated. Everyone gets disintermediated. So you no longer have the customer relationship. You have lost that customer relationship. They have the customer relationship. They have the customer data. So most of the companies that I spend time with, and as I said, I'm a global traveler, all come to us and actually say to us, how do we actually get access to technology that means that we don't get disintermediated? Yeah, well, sure, we're going to go and talk to all of those social media, big brand intelligent assistants, because you know what? They're all going to talk to each other. They all do stuff. I mean, there's many of you in the room that will have cool intelligent agents that will be doing stuff for people. But people will want to know who they're working for and where does my data go. And we've done a lot of research on this. And the brands will be very, very jealous about where is their data going, their customer data. So just about every brand that we work with wants to take our technology and white label it. We're cool with that. They'll want to keep the data. We're cool with that, but what we do say is that you need to share that data back with the customer, so you build a trust network so you can actually have now this mutual trust and value. And then with MyWave, my own company, we're solving really complex issues with this. And I'll give you some examples further on around we actually are making people's lives easier doing that. So there isn't just going to be one answer. We are moving into this very, very rapidly. 3 years ago when I started MyWave, I think people thought I was a crazy lady. And many of you in this room are probably relatively young companies if you're working in the intelligent assistant space. What's been fascinating is how fast the market has risen up to meet us. It's happening at an unprecedented speed. The phone calls that you get from around the world by the day, not only from brands that are trying to figure out how to get match fit for this fourth industrial revolution, but from the sensor companies that want to now link you to the sensors. Hey, we've got the sensor layer. It almost feels like we're rebuilding the human body, but we're building it at massive scale. And this is what's so exciting. And this is the potential of the fourth industrial revolution. But equally, at the same time, man is at a crossroads, because we can use this for great good, or we can actually use this for bad things. I'll give you a good example where it's being used for bad things, and that's in China. So the Chinese are embracing this enormously. The challenge with China, though, is that they're using it, it's called social credit. It's almost like, well, you get stack ranked now amongst all your peers in China in terms of your access to things in China, whether it be a wife, money, political capability, housing, because you're now being you're being stack ranked in a scorecard. And if you believe in the wrong religion, or you're not a member of the right party, or you haven't done the right things, then you've got a really low stacked ranking, and that's called digital discrimination. And so we have a real responsibility to make sure that in this world that we're creating, which will in fact remove so much friction and will free up so much benefit, that we actually don't start to unwittingly create what is called digital discrimination. And I would call that the low road. I think China is following the low road. Singapore actually is also, I used to live in Singapore for 4 years. They're also doing the same thing, monitoring everything. But they're a controlled island state, and they'll know everything about you. So our point of view is that we think it's better that we actually put people in control of these intelligent agents so that they can actually get the outcomes that they're looking for. And Control Shift, if you haven't heard of them, have done some really interesting research in the UK, where they've called this the personal information economy. Because personal information and authentication and identity is, in fact, the critical element of the fourth industrial revolution. But you need to be able to give the data back to people so that they can actually have use and utility over it. And they just did some research with the British government where £16.5 billion of new value in sales and profits could be unlocked by doing this right in Britain alone. Imagine what can be done in America, imagine what can be done in Europe, imagine what can be done in other parts of the world. So there's more and more evidence coming around that there is enormous opportunity. There is also enormous pace for disruption. You can't do this slowly, so don't think that you're going to spend 3 years trying to prove this out. You need to get involved in proof of concepts, doing pilots, learning, failing fast, figuring out what works, and also working out, is your brand trusted enough for consumers to really want to actually share more about themselves with you in order to get a better outcome? Because some of you might not have the brand permission to do that, and we're doing quite a bit of work with brands there. So this has actually got tremendous opportunity, but equally there are hazards there as well. So this is where we see most firms though. So if we look to the left-hand side, and many of you will have seen these charts many, many times, we are, in my view, in the early adoption phase of the fourth industrial revolution. When I run around Australia, New Zealand, Europe, the US, and here, we're talking to brands that I would say are at the forefront of thinking about that across almost every industry. And we're doing some really, really interesting projects with them, helping them think about where are they positioned. But the interesting thing is that the chasm is real. And the chasm is an interesting thing, because sometimes companies get stuck. So what ends up happening is, in the case of banks, well, yes, we'd love to move, and then they go to their IT departments to open up the APIs data of their customer data. It's like the IT department says, well, that will take 9 months to give you that API. Well, that's one chasm that you have to cross. Some people will be very threatened by this and say, well, I'll lose power. I'm not going to let that get through my committee discussions, or they'll try and slow it down. So many of you, I can see some smiles around the room and some nodding faces. This is the reality. But the good news is that a lot of people are jumping across the chasm. And if they're not jumping across the chasm, they're building bridges. Or they're figuring out how to stop being dinosaurs and start to fly like a bird. That can be in innovation units, that can actually be in pilots, that can actually be in reality. And I'll talk to you about a couple of examples of companies and what they're doing out there. Some of them are actually reshaping and building whole new divisions to build new business models, because the size of the prize is huge. And the size of the prize for the guys that jump first will be higher. In the old days, it used to be safe. Remember fast follower? Well, you know what? Fast followers die in this world. You actually do need to jump. It might be scary not to jump. In fact, you might say, well, I'd rather just stay there and wait. But if you wait, you will actually have lost the opportunity, because there is a new digital chessboard forming, that those companies that, in fact, move first will be the ones that will start to build out what we call the new ecosystems. And I'll talk about these ecosystems in a minute, because they are real, and MIT are measuring them. And there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers in this world. So you have to figure out, where do you fit in the fourth industrial revolution, and which side of the chasm do you fit? But the good news is a lot of companies are moving across, and we're seeing this happening internationally. So this is not just a UK phenomenon, or a phenomenon down in Asia, or over across the ditch in the US. A lot of companies are innovating on this right now to create this intelligent neural layer, and looking at how do they get end-to-end outcomes, moving past the old products and services into ones that generate more revenue and better margins, so that they stay relevant for the future. So this is part of this is part of the mindset shift, though, that all of you will need to go through if you haven't gone through it already. So what we have across the top are some of the trends that have driven the fourth industrial revolution. Some of them are technology trends. Obviously, we've got sensors, we've got robotics, we've got mobile devices, but it's not just about the mobile device now. It's the intelligent agents, it's natural language, it's speech, it's text-to-speech, etc. And then you've got the advent of the millennials, who actually are digital natives, and they are already very au fait with technology. The whole notion of experiences, that people will pay a premium for a great experience, so everyone chasing themselves in the race to the bottom on price doesn't work anymore. If you're doing that, you've just turned yourself into a commodity. It's about doing more than that. So it's what is the 1 + 1 of, when you're doing the mortgage, it's the home. So help me get the home, and the mortgage comes along with that. If you are going to fly, it's actually knowing, well, why am I flying? And can you give me the end-to-end outcome and the experience, which might not just be the air ticket, but actually the destination on the other side as to whether you're doing this with your wife or whether you're going on business. There's lots of things that you can do to make a great experience, make people's lives easier, and generate loyalty. And intelligent agents give you the ability to do that at scale with low cost, because you can't give everyone a hyper-personalized experience using human beings to do that. You have to use technology to create these hyper-personal experiences. You need to give the data back to the people because they're not going to share it with you if they don't trust you. So there's a whole bunch of things that have to be in place in order for you to master this world. The economy, we're in this new normal. There is not the growth anymore. The subprime mortgage crisis and the things that happened in the Lehman Brothers, we've not finished that fallout. But what it's signaling is that we're actually at the end of the old cycle, we're building a new one. And of course, governments are fed up. They're fed up with the energy industry not changing. Why is there £1.5 billion of savings that consumers in Britain could have if only the energy companies would enable consumers to move around a little bit more easily? Same thing with the banks. And why do you think the governments are being so hard on energy companies with regulators, with banks, with regulators? Because the friction and that asymmetry of information where you made it so complicated, you couldn't let the customer go. Guess what? The fourth industrial revolution, the customers, they will be gone. So you better figure out how to work in that world. So this is the supply chain. Now I've spent with SAP 17 years automating that value chain across 27 industries, so I have every industry in my head. That's why I know how this all works. But what's interesting at the far end of that is that the consumer was always thought about as this dumb participant. That girl or guy, average age 18 to 24, she might have a propensity to buy, she lives in this area, let's do some big data analysis on her, and let's throw some stuff at her, and let's hope some of it sticks. How inefficient is that model? The fourth industrial revolution does not allow that model. There is no authentication, there's no hyper-personalization, there's no identity, really. I'm just one of a herd of animals that you're going to market to en masse. Very wasteful. In the case of intelligent agents like our one, we can actually be very precise and very targeted, but again, with permission and trust for the consumer. So the world that we're moving into is a world where you put the customer at the center, where you figure out what their jobs are to be done, and you bring all of this together, and you start to create end-to-end outcomes in an ecosystem. So if you're sitting over here as the manufacturer or the retailer, start to think about what those extra things are that you can do that create you to be a more trusted brand in the minds of a person. So in the case of a telco, the telcos are thinking about what in-home services could they be providing. In the case of retailers who sell tins of beans, they're looking at how do we get into banking, how do we get into things like energy, and how do we now stitch together, best deals and best approaches to help people always save money on all things. So they're busy figuring out how they can actually create better outcomes for people. So here is the crux of it, and I'd like you to give yourself a little bit of a test. Where do you fit on this chart? So what's interesting is Professor Peter Weil and he and I have met, and they're doing some research across the world, across many brands, around who are the winners and who are the losers. And all this material is all freely available. I'm very happy to send you the papers if you'd like to drop me an email on this. But what's really interesting out of his research, and he's also studying some of the clients that we're working with as well. So because he wants to know who the winners and who the losers are in these new ecosystems. What's really interesting is along the bottom is where many, many companies are. A lot of companies say, well, we're moving up the line to be an omni-channel business. And when you start to look at the companies that are actually on the top right, that's actually where you want to be, an ecosystem provider. So it's quite interesting just to look at the statistics that if you are on the top right, you have 32% higher revenue and 27% higher profit margin if you've moved to the top right. I sit on the board of a bank, and we actually did this test ourselves as a board with senior management, and we thought that we were on our way to being an omni-channel business, and we thought we'd win a race by doing that. Guess what? The race actually isn't there anymore, it's moved to the right. So if you're just going to do an omni-channel, great. So you've given me one door to walk through. But that's still a product, it's still a service. You haven't really done anything to actually create more value for the consumer. You'll still be commoditized, you'll still be the same as everybody else. You have to think more than that. So a lot of the work that I end up doing is actually workshops where you actually start to help people start to not only think about who are their customers, but who are their partners. Most brands in the world have partners. These are partners that they already have out there. Whether you're a bank, you might already be working with Visa or MasterCard with everyday daily deals. How do you now start to bring those daily deals? So when I'm saving for the holiday, or I'm saving for the home, or I'm saving for the car, well, why wouldn't the bank actually help me book the holiday, help me get the car, and help me actually find the home, and make that a frictionless experience where an intelligent agent is automatically filling in the forms for me and getting that job done? Why do you have to always forget the customer, you know, even though they've banked with you for 20 years? So these are real life projects that we're involved in. So what's really interesting though is that if you are moving into the top right, and it's not that difficult, it really is not that difficult, it's a mindset shift. The challenge is though you don't have time forever. So remember I showed you the chasm. If you haven't jumped across the chasm first or second, there aren't that many spaces in the economy for an ecosystem in certain of these areas. There is only space for a few. And they're the ones that will become the masters of this universe. They are the ones that will actually be the closest to the customer, where you are the hub, and other brands will become a spoke in your hub. So the question is, you can be a spoke. That is actually a valid company strategy. You can be a spoke. But you're going to be then down in the bottom left where you're a supplier. The outcome of that is that you will then need to be much more efficient. You have to be much lower cost. You're going to have to be really super efficient to be a spoke in someone else's hub. But equally, if you're aspirational and brave enough as a brand, you can in fact be a hub yourself. And what I find is amazing is how many fantastic hubs there potentially are out there. So when we go and talk to the brands, we actually help them figure out, are you a hub or are you a spoke? If you're a spoke today, how do you get to be a hub? Who are those partners? Who are your customers today? What are their jobs to be done? And you know, we're able to help them get there in 6 to 9 months. We can actually help them move from the old world to the new world. This is not difficult, but it is a mindset shift. And so most of what my company, MyWave, is about is actually not just the technology, it's actually helping your mindset shift and being fast enough on all the prototyping so you can then take this up to the board and say, hey, actually, this is, we've just tested this with consumers and this is the new way that we can in fact move to the top right. And there's so much data now that boards can see now of where it's already been proven. So that kind of brings it to sort of kind of what we're up. So we have this brain, we have an intelligent agent called Frank, but we're not just servicing him in an omni-channel. We're not just taking him out to the net to tell me what the weather's like in Minneapolis or go and tell me where the nearest good pizza restaurant is. We're doing some more complicated things than that. We're actually turning Frank into the consumer, help me get the best power plan and best power price. And that's already live overseas and it's actually being rolled out into the UK shortly, where that £1.5 billion of value that has not been unlocked in the UK is coming to the UK, and it's coming through a major, major brand that is in everyone's homes. And so what that means is that you've got millions and millions of British consumers now using an intelligent agent in a trust network where their power bill is ingested, they have control of the data, and that intelligent agent automatically switches them to best plan, best price, automatically all the time. And it has some benefits for the energy industry that I'll talk to you about in a moment, and it also has benefits for the consumer. But we're doing this with banking, we're doing this in a whole bunch of different industries. So if you can come to our stand, I'm not going to go and spend time shamelessly pushing MyWave and Frank today, so you can go and see Amy and Wally at the booth and see what he's up to, because everything on our website is what he's doing at the moment. But effectively, it's an intelligent agent where you're in control of the data, but you're in control, the brand, with the consumer. It's not being sucked up into some, Facebook or some other big brand. But equally, we can share data if should the consumer wish to and should you wish to. So again, this becomes you're in control of these experiences together with the consumer. And you can see some examples there, whether it's buying a car, getting healthier, getting a home, etc. But what we end up doing, though, is we actually end up with brands helping them build ecosystems. And it's really, really interesting. We've got bean sellers who sell tons of beans that are just a commodity today. There's too much competition, and we're helping them now also connect the dots for their customers in retail, banking, because they can bring banking services in, and in energy. We've got another company that we just spoke to yesterday here in the UK that does a lot of really interesting things around credit and credit scores. Imagine a world now where you flip the model and you actually put the credit score in the hands of the consumer, and they can lead and negotiate the mortgage interest loan with an auto-filled form. Here's my credit score, I'm a really good credit rating, who wants my business? So these are the things that Frank does. Frank actually flips the model and enables the smart companies out there to figure out how to become masters of ecosystems and flip that model and turn that into a reality. And we've got lots of examples. Travel is another one where you just say to Frank, book me that flight, and Frank knows all your preferences, and he'll know what what kind of seat you like, he'll know the kind of hotels you like. You can tell Frank what the value is of the ticket that you want to spend on, so you've got real-time market data, because there's two sides to Frank. There's a dashboard that goes to the brand, so you've got real-time market data with consumers, and there's also something in it for the consumer as well. So this is where we're pretty unique as we fly around the world helping companies move across. Clearly, in all of this, is that personalization and identity is really important. So you've really got to know who you're talking to. My biggest worry about chatbots out there is I think that there's going to be a massive negative reaction to the chatbots that I'm seeing starting to come up. And I'll tell you why. First of all, you don't know who the chatbot's working for. We know that there's quite a bit of fraud. There's going to be fraudulent use of these chatbots. You think you're talking to a human. That chatbot may in fact be driven by somebody that's sitting in Nigeria, could be driven by somebody sitting in the Ukraine, that actually is trying to get information from you to go and steal something. So verification, authentication, and identity is absolutely critical in all of this. Our point of view on that is that that then just becomes almost like the invisible oil. So I've got too many pins, I've got too many passwords. In fact, it's getting to a point where I actually have to write them down because I can't remember them anymore. It could be a sign of my age, but I think I've just got too many things going on in too many different parts of the world. And it shouldn't have to be that hard. So when your intelligent agent then is able to actually authenticate who's coming to you and who you are talking to, and this is again, where you can start to use, credit scoring companies can actually suddenly start to become agencies to know customers. So suddenly your credit score actually turns into your identity as well and can turn into authentication. There's so many things that you can do to remove and ease the friction that you have in everyday modern banking experiences. Now, I sit on the board of a bank, and I am of an opinion that banks have almost got arterial sclerosis because they are so bound in the core banking systems. They can't release the APIs fast enough, unless you're an atom bank and you're born digital first, to be able to work on some of these things. So we've done some amazing projects with banks, but oh my God, they're the slowest guys to work with. A couple will cross the chasm, but a lot of them are going to fall on the other side. And that's why there's so much M&A activity in banks. And even some of the challenger banks are going to find it hard because the mindsets just aren't there. So we all know what identity is going to be. I think one of the biggest things that distresses me the most is the genome sequencing is amazing. Think about personalized medicine. There is nothing more unique to every single one of us in this room than our genome. Because why? We're all unique. The old industrial revolution of the first and the second and the third treats us like herds of animals. They do not see how unique we are. Our genome, we are unique. But what's worse is that all the genome sequencing that's being done right now is your data, when you have your genome taken, is being sold. You don't know where it's going. You don't know how it's being used. This is where, the negative side of that is that if you were predisposed to an illness, imagine that now weighing on your healthcare insurance or your life insurance. This is where, again, you really do need to be in control of your data. And if someone already has your genome and that horse has actually left the stable, how can I ever use my genome to verify who I am? Because I don't even know where my genome went to. So find that out. It's being sold, supposedly for scientific purposes, for research. What kind of research? Where? Who's using it? So that's something that's so, and I think the reason why I'm raising it is that a lot of people don't even know that. So if you look at all of these things, it can be voice, fingerprint, retina. How many of you have seen the movie The Night Manager? Yeah, it's cool. Hey, I would say retina display, transfer my money. And my money then, squillions is transferring around the world. These are the things that we absolutely will have. And so your intelligent agent will have means and ways to identify you, means and ways to be able to identify you to other parties. We have a thing where we call them consent receipts. So for example, we never issue out your credit card details. We issue secure tokens. A token is released to a brand, and when the consumer is no longer doing business with that brand, the token is revoked. That's the way it should work. Why are your credit card details being brandished around the world? So so from the point of view of authentication, you shouldn't have to give away so much about yourself. Your intelligent agent can in fact also stop bad guys coming to you, because the intelligent agent will be able to verify who is this bot that's trying to have a conversation with me on the consumer's behalf. So the authentication and identity is two-way. And there's going to be more and more that will come out as I'm sure the conference works in terms of discussions in this area. And this is a rapidly emerging field. I want to get to a point where I walk through an airport and I'm just known, hey, I'm unlikely to have a bomb in my luggage. Because why? Because I fly through here every week. I'm on the board. I do this trip every time. I shouldn't have to fill out the forms. You should just know me. And that world is coming. And airports are going to become more and more intelligent and smart. So we really do go, and we can probably have sensors that are sniffing the chemicals in the bomb. They're sniffing for the chemicals in the drugs, because it's all there. So sensors can be as smart as sniffer dogs. So this is the world we are moving into. And it's not, again, 10 years away. These are all things that I have seen that are being worked on right now. I think you've probably seen this as my key thrust. You cannot forget the norms of human relationship. You will never have a successful strategy in the fourth industrial revolution as a brand unless you respect the norms of a human relationship. And they're very, very simple things. First of all, you need to have permission. When you walk into a room like this, and you walk up to someone, first of all, you actually have to ask permission to talk to them in the first place, don't you? You can't just walk into the room going, hi, I'm from Coca-Cola. It would be really, really rude. Like, who is that jerk? Well, how many brands have those jerk moments? Respect. You've got to respect me and my time, and also my identity and my data. So respect is really important in these relationships, which then builds trust. And if you don't have brand trust, and we've done a lot of work with brands, some brands want to get into health and wellness. And if you're a retailer, you don't have the brand trust. Well, the consumer says, you just want to sell me groceries. I don't trust you. But you would trust a healthcare provider to do a health and wellness scenario. So you've got to work out, what do you have brand trust for? It needs to be a conversation, and that's why, again, in our technology, we don't just actually talk to, you can talk to Frank, and Frank can talk back. But in fact, we also allow text. So you can do speech to text, you can type in text, and we also do drop-down menus. In fact, we do lots of ways of being able to interact, because conversations happen in different ways, and different people have different ways of wanting to interact, and so you have to respect that. It's not just all about speech. In fact, speech can be really annoying when you've got a lot of data that needs to come back, like, what are my flights? And then some person keeps on asking you more questions, and you've got to keep talking back. That's just too noisy. And you don't want to keep having these chatbots trying to have these authentic conversations that are cheesy. So a conversation is one that's respectful, where I've permissioned it, where there is trust that I know who it is, and then mutual value. If it isn't creating any value to me, then why would you have my time? And that's what every single customer thinks about, because everyone is time poor. So norms of human relationships are really, really important when you're thinking about designing these things. And these are just some examples. You can go to our stand and have a look at all of these things. This is a really interesting one. So this is a company overseas in Australia that is currently in a completely different industry, has just formed a brand new division. In fact, they're in a building products company that is being disintermediated by the Chinese, because Chinese are able to make building products cheaper than them, because Australia's cost of labour is very high. So what's happening is that they've done a massive survey using some of our technology to talk to 3,000 Australians about what they love and hate about buying and selling a home. And we ran a workshop with them, and we came up with all of the pain points and what the jobs are to be done, and then they went and tested that. And in fact, they came back last week and said, yep, everything we thought of in the workshop actually was true, because the CEO said, we want to test that. They formed a brand new division. They're actually putting this technology in that division, and they are creating something which is going to create an incredibly rich ecosystem to disrupt, in a good way, how homes are bought and sold in Australia. And what's interesting is that we've been testing this in the UK, and it's the same issue here. So this technology is globally replicable. And in fact, these guys and we will be bringing this into the UK. So this is codename Best Nest. This one is where we've been working with a bank, and I've taken the brand off it because it's under NDA, but we've had a couple of major banks working with proactive intelligent assistants, like how do you build brand trust with a bank? So the brand, the feedback from the consumers has been, you're always dinging me for fees. I don't like these fees. You ding me because I go into overdraft. What if my intelligent agent told me before I went into overdraft, I might be going into overdraft based on what he can see, and then you're able to actually have the intelligent agent help you move money around, so you never have to have overdraft fees ever again. So this is called proactive agency. So we have the ability to be proactive and also to be reactive, which is really important. We can also move money to the best account. So which means that here's my money in this account, I can move money to another account. Now imagine this in the hands now of a company that may sit over the top of all the banks. You could go and look at all the interest rates and actually automatically move money between them. So think about how disruptive that would be. You can do the same thing for mortgages. You could actually start to take this type of technology and put it as a mortgage broking service across all the banks, because all of those rates are automatically available. And and quite frankly, there is a certain amount of brand loyalty, but equally, if you made it really easy for me to get an outcome, which is actually getting the home, not just getting the loan, then people would move that way. And that's, again, part of the fourth industrial revolution thinking, is positively disrupting that industry. And we're working with brands who really want to do that positive disruption. This is one that we've got live as well, which is in energy. This is coming to the UK. This one's really interesting because you've already done all the My Data initiative in the UK, but no one's using it. £1.5 billion of value that has not been unlocked. All we have to do with Frank here is scan your QR code on your energy bill. Your QR code contains all your energy data. It contains all of your pricing data. In New Zealand, we have 1.7 million consumers and 27,000 power plans. How in the hell is anyone supposed to figure out what is the best plan, best price? It's not quite as bad here. But what we do is we just take a photo of the QR code. We can then automatically monitor. Again, it's your data. It's not going anywhere. What your energy consumption is, and if your mother-in-law's just moved in, or your spouse has just had a child, and you've now got more energy heating requirements, Frank will automatically recognise that that profile has changed. You're no longer on best plan, best price, and move you. And so these are the real life examples that we have. And this is what consumers are saying about it. So this is the SaverWatt energy one for the last couple of slides. 87% of respondents said that they were very open to someone else managing their data. So we got really, really positive feedback from consumers. They said that they would use it to manage their power. They've got very positive net promoter scores. And what's interesting is Richard Bates, who is the part of Consumer Futures, and he's actually here in the UK, sees this as a valid model where it allows consumers to outsource the onus of the switching process, because it's actually the intelligent agent that's always doing it for you. And the interesting thing is that once you've got the intelligent agent doing this one for you, Frank can just wake up and say, well, I can now help you save money on insurance. I can now help you save money on something else. So these are examples of where you can actually start to also positively disrupt industries. And then the energy providers, we had a hypothesis. The energy retailer, would they love it or would they hate it? But the good thing is they get an intelligent agent too. It's called the Intelligent Agent Dashboard, where they get real-time market data to hyper-personalize offers and promotions all the way down to the end consumer. And they get told before they lose a customer that this client is no longer on best plan, best price. Would you like to retain them? Can't do that through the current price comparison sites. And then the other thing is that they see this as a way of actually being able to, very low cost, acquire customers. Because today what they have to do is they've got to phone you, or they've got to spend expensive money on advertising. or they've got to have door knockers. You don't need any of this with the fourth industrial revolution. The intelligent agent knows your power plan, he knows your power price. When the retailer wants this profile of customer in this geography because they've got excess capacity, 1,200 customers are suddenly acquired for almost little, if no cost. So this is the power of the fourth industrial revolution. Don't think it's a decade from now. It is here now. It's coming to your industry, and I wish you a wonderful conference. I'm very happy to host any questions that you may have at our booth, and you're welcome to reach out to me personally if you have any further questions, or whether you would like to have any of the research papers that I have referred to in today's talk. So thank you very much.